believe that being a defender requires more than building shooting skills on a range. It's also a development of the heart, mind, body, and spirit. Join us as we explore what it truly means to be a defender in your training and in your everyday life. Welcome to Defenders Live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Defenders Live. I'm your host, Laura Thorson, and I'm so glad that you're with me tonight. If you're new or watching this as a replay, welcome. We're so glad you're here. And for those of you that are with us every week, you know the drill. Please drop in the comments where you're watching from. We always want to hear from you. Tonight, I'm going to be talking with Shavonne Thompson, founder of Throttle Thrive, a men's treatment facility specifically designed for veterans and first responders struggling with addiction and recovery. We agreed that this time of the year is especially hard for some people and wanted to provide some hope and insight into this topic. Now, Shavonne's been on the show before, so if you want to check out the previous episode we did with her, you can go back to that episode. Just search up Throttle Thrive on the Defenders Live channel, and you'll be able to see her previous interview. But we did want to bring her back for this special episode. And I also want to let you know that the founder of Defenders USA, Mr. Adam Winch, is back on with us tonight, and he might be providing some valuable insight as well and may have some questions for Shavonne. So if you see him pop on the screen from time to time, don't be alarmed by that. Did you have anything you wanted to say, Adam?
Yeah, I'm so glad we're having Shavonne on. Thank you for having her. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, as you can see back here. And maybe someday we'll share the story, but I'm so glad that she's here, and thank you for hosting her.
Absolutely, yeah. So as I said before, Adam may pop on the screen from time to time. He is running everything behind the scenes, and I know he's not been feeling well for a while now, and so we're really glad to have him back. Really appreciate him. A few things here. Don't forget, at the end of the show, we're going to have a live Q&A with Shavonne. So if there's a question that pops in your head as the show is going on, just go ahead, put it in the comments, and we'll gather those questions towards the end of the broadcast, and you can ask Shavonne those questions. Let's see. So just a few things before I introduce her and bring her on. One really big announcement, actually, that I'm really excited about. Defenders Live is now officially on almost 10 podcasting platforms in audio-only format. So originally, we were video-only format on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, and other platforms, but now we are also in podcast form, so you can easily go there to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, wherever you listen to podcasts. We are now on there. And funny enough, the first 2 episodes that I ever did are now posted on there, and many, many more to come. So those will be populating as time goes on. So be sure to go back and check those out. Those are really interesting to listen to. Also, if you don't want to miss out on any upcoming shows, be sure to check out defenders-live.com. Sign up for notifications there. We do have a private Facebook group, but the reach has not been the greatest. So if you want to make sure you don't miss out on what's going on with Defenders Live, you can go to defenders-live.com and sign up for those email notifications there at the bottom of the homepage. And I also want to let you know to stay tuned towards the end of the show. I'm going to have a couple more really big announcements that I want to share with you. So make sure to stick around for that. So let's get right into the interview with Shavonne Thompson. Shavonne is a grateful alcoholic, 10 years sober, and founder of Throttle Thrive, a men's-only detox and substance issue treatment facility exclusively for first responders and veterans. She left her hard hat, safety vest, and steel-toed boots behind when she left a 13-year career in the commercial construction industry as a superintendent to jump into the treatment industry. She is passionate about sobriety, recovery, and mental health, and most of all is passionate about providing a place for first responders and veterans to receive care. So let's bring Shavonne onto the show. Hey, Shavonne.
Hey, Laura, thank you so much for having me.
Hey there. Thanks for coming back. I can't believe that after the first one, you decided to come back.
Oh, yeah, it's fun. We're having a great time.
Yeah. Yeah, you really left an impact on a lot of people the last time you were here, and your mission is so important. You and I talked earlier and decided that this time of the year would be ideal for you to come back on. Now, before we get into the topic of the show, which we called the silent epidemic, could you, that bio that I gave you, that I introduced you with, just barely scratch the surface of what you do and why you do it? Could you fill in a little bit for people that have never met you before?
Sure. So I'm Shavonne Thompson. I am the owner and also the founder of Throttle Thrive, which is a detox substance abuse treatment center and mental health facility exclusively for veterans and first responders. And prior to this, I actually worked in construction. I worked for 13 years for a general contractor. It was a huge general contractor, claim to fame. We rebuilt the Pentagon after 9/11. I wasn't actually involved in that project because I was in 10th grade, but it was an incredible journey going through construction. I basically, as a superintendent, I was running big jobs in the field. I ran a lot of the jobs at LAX airport. I mean, one of many superintendents. We're running multi-million, billion-dollar projects. And it was really that experience in construction that taught me everything that I needed to know about running a business. And so I do feel like I learned what was necessary to then transition into running a treatment facility full time. And how I got into that is that I'm an alcoholic in recovery. So I've been sober for 10 years. The end of January 28th, 2013 is my sobriety date. So coming up on 11 years, really excited to celebrate that. And it was through my own journey of recovery and then also watching a very loved family member still struggle in his addiction. That was one of the main catalysts that led me to leave my career and go into serving first responders and veterans and be that place where they can really get the healing and the treatment and the trauma therapy, everything that they need to be able to get better. And before that, I went to USC. I studied engineering. I grew up in Ventura and I started drinking when I was 13 years old. So drank for a long time, got sober when I was 27, and now I'm 38 and going on 11 years. So that's a little bit about me.
And so why did you choose to serve veterans and first responders in particular?
Sure. So in my journey of adventuring into the treatment world and figuring out if I was going to start a treatment center from scratch or try to purchase one that was already operational, I was touring some treatment facilities, and one of the owners was giving me a tour and took me into the garage and said, "Hey, my first responders, actually firefighters, they love this gym that I've got in the garage." And I was like, "Oh, that's really interesting. Like firefighters need to go to treatment. Okay." And I had a mentor. I still have the same mentor at the time. And I called him. I'm like, "Hey, do you take first responders? Like, is that a thing for you?" And he said that he didn't. And my heart just sank. Like, "What do you mean that you don't?" He's like, "Well, they have a lot of special needs and they need things like this. And they don't really drive so well with the general population." And he kind of listed out some various problems. And that opened the doors for me to start investigating and try to figure out what is going on and why would someone not be catering to first responders. And that's when I found out that the suicide rate among law enforcement is equally as heartbreaking as the suicide rate with veterans. I think the veteran suicide rate is a lot more publicized, and the 22 a day, which is actually probably quite a lot higher than that. And then also learning that law enforcement officers are more likely to die of suicide than they are in the line of duty. And I'm just like, there is something wrong here, and I want to have a dog in the fight. And I want to make a difference. And the way that I had already built out Throttle Thrive was that it would be a men's facility, that it would be for warriors, that it would be more of a challenging program that doesn't just provide, a soft, easy place for people to be babysat. Like, no, that's not what we do here. It's all about hard work and discipline and facing all of the reasons why someone is drinking and why they're in treatment and the trauma and the childhood trauma and the issues they're having in their marriage or the divorce or all of those things. We bring all of that to the surface. So it was always built as this militant boot camp style treatment center. So when I decided to
Mhm.
serve only first responders and veterans, all I did is on the front webpage put exclusively serving veterans and first
Yeah.
responders. I really
Yeah.
changed nothing else. It was already built for
Yeah.
them. And I just feel
Mhm.
called to this population. I'm also a patriot and I love this country and I want to support our heroes and our warriors and give them the safe place to be able to come for recovery. It
Mhm.
breaks my heart when I hear about the law enforcement officers that have been to other facilities that either didn't treat them well because they were law enforcement or had a clinician there that had her own opinions about law enforcement and did not
Mhm.
treat them well. I'm like, oh, that just like really irks me.
Yeah.
Or at other treatment facilities, a lot of times they'll have a very high population of formerly incarcerated clients. And so that doesn't
Oh.
very well with law enforcement. We actually had someone fly out here from another state because he was at a general population treatment facility and he felt like he was going to get attacked by the other clients there because he was law enforcement. So that's why he came here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, obviously it is needed for more than one reason. And as I said before, the title we called the show is The Silent Epidemic. So tell me why this is silent. Why is not very many people talking about it, and or why aren't many first responders and veterans seeking help, or are they and they just can't find it? I'm confused as to exactly what's going on.
Sure. So it looks different for lots of different people. It's probably the most challenging for people that live alone because they don't have someone actively there. But typically, if someone is contemplating suicide, they see it as their way out. And they know that if they vocalize it to someone, that someone is likely going to try and stop them.
Right.
What they fail to realize is that there's a different way out and that there is hope and that there is healing and there are programs that work. Another flip side to that, I actually just had a conversation earlier today with a veteran and we were working through getting him out here and some other logistical things. And the VA came up and he's like, I will not go to the VA, period, under any circumstance, because I've seen what they do to people. They're going to drug me up and they're going to make me color in books and I'm just going to be a zombie. And those are his words because he had
Yeah.
seen that. He had seen another combat veteran go into the VA, get put on a ton of meds and just basically be held in like a psych ward where he was literally just coloring books, drooling, according
Wow.
to this
Right.
veteran. And so
Yeah.
I think a lot of times there's also a significant amount of fear involved because some people have been mistreated and they haven't gotten good care and they have been mistreated and overly medicated and they haven't actually been helped. And unfortunately, that's a
Mhm.
very common story that with most of the veterans that have come through here, not all of them, but a good percentage of our veterans have had either that shared experience or watched that play out. And so
Mhm.
they're very hesitant to trust people, trust a facility, and the VA has wronged them in a lot of ways. So
Mhm.
that's part of it. The other part of it, as first responders and military, typically training involves taking out the threat, right? They're trained to take out the bad guy. And then unfortunately, when they are drinking too much and if there's someone who's prone to violence, let's say, and now they're the one that is angry at home or yelling at the kids or yelling at their wife or somehow bringing some form of maybe domestic violence to whatever level into their home,
Mhm.
then they have become the threat. And even though they hate what they do and they hate their behavior, they start to internalize that. They can't stop the behavior because they have untreated alcoholism, unprocessed PTSD. And so they're suffering terribly and they don't have the tools and they're not sober. And so it's this terrible
Mhm.
cycle where inside they're internalizing a lot of shame and guilt and remorse. And as that builds, they have now become the threat. And what are they trained to do? They're trained to take out the threat. They don't want their family to suffer anymore. And as a result of that, what they see as the solution is, well, I'm the monster in my family. I'm the person hurting my wife. I'm the one making the kids cry. I'm the threat. They would be better off without me. And it's those
Mm.
thoughts relapse that perpetuate, and then the drinking doesn't help. And if there's other drugs involved, it just gets worse from there, and they're not thinking clearly. And so it can spiral out of control. But the good news is, this is literally the story of the clients that I have seen and cared for. And they come here and we start to pour in some hope. And of course, the drugs and the alcohol are completely removed. And so the physical sobriety comes in, and they start to get a little bit more clear. And then they start to have conversations, and then the therapy comes in, and the group therapy and the peer support and they start sleeping, and they start eating, and they start exercising. And so all of these things combined lead to them getting better over time and getting the right resources. And there's lots of different things that play into this. Traumatic brain injury is another one. And that's very common, again, with first responders, with veterans. And if they have a brain injury and that's not being treated,
many of them don't even know they have one.
Exactly. So that's where, as part of their treatment and their awareness, and as we're educating them and guiding them and leading them, we're introducing them to things like brain scans. Hey, this exists. You should go get this done. Let's get some scans of your brain. Let's look at them. Let's see what the experts have to say. And then let's look at treatment modalities that can actually help with this, whether it's brain painting, neurofeedback, TMS, MERT, etc. There's a long list. So in a nutshell.
Hey, Adam.
So Shavonne, you said something quickly, if you don't mind defining it. Usually we hear it as PTSD or PTS. You said PTI, I think is what you said really quickly.
PTSD. Sure.
Yeah, do you mind defining that for us?
Post-traumatic stress injury. I really, as much as possible, try to refrain from saying PTSD. I don't think it's a disorder. I think it's actually a very normal response to having unprocessed trauma. And that's the thing, it's unprocessed, and we can process it. It's the reason it's unprocessed is because someone doesn't have the tools or the knowledge or the help or the support to be able to move through it and process it correctly. So at Throttle Thrive, one of our main ways that we help people process trauma is EMDR. Our primary therapist and our group therapist, they're both trained in EMDR. So that's our primary therapy, like talk therapy modality, but it's so much more than that. I mean, one, getting physically sober, because if the client's not physically sober, I don't care how much trauma therapy you do, it's not really going to help for people that are truly of the addict, alcoholic type, which pretty much is everybody that comes in here. So first, physically sober, and then proper trauma care. But it's not just talk therapy. It's everything that we do here. I like to say holistic, and sleep is one of the most fundamental pieces of that. We have to get them to sleep. And I'm not talking about medicating them to be a zombie and tranquilize them into sleep. We're actually, I brought on a PhD psychologist, Dr. Richard Shane, and he spent the past 30 something years researching sleep, developing sleep. He's the founder and creator of the Sleep Easy method. It's a free app. You can get it on any app platform. And so he is teaching non-pharmaceutical methods for our first responders and veterans to be able to sleep. And it's really helping. And some of it, honestly, is really simple. Some of it is like, hey, do you use earplugs when you sleep? One of our clients, that made all the difference in the world. It's something that I've done for many, many years. I started doing it in college when I had roommates. Other things are like sunlight in the morning, getting early morning sunlight, not taking naps, refraining from caffeine later in the day, not overdoing caffeine, not taxing your adrenal glands, and then getting a great workout. That's another thing that I push big time here, is not forcing, but strongly encouraging all of our clients to work out. We have it on the schedule Monday through Thursday, twice a day. And then on the weekends, once a day, and Friday, once a day. So 4 days out of the week, it's 2 times a day. And 3 days out of the week, it's once a day, to either lift, run the hills, swim in the pool, cardio, weightlifting, or going to a professional gym.
So I really appreciate the fact that you defined it as an injury, right? When we call it a disorder, PTSD, it connotates in a sense that there's no way around it, right? And that you're not responsible for it, or there's nothing you can do to take care of it. And I completely disagree. but it takes a lot of internal mental coaching, which is
Mhm.
what you do, to be able to get there. So I really appreciated that. The other thing you mentioned, there was two different things you mentioned. Talk about the suicide rate among veterans. I've had multiple friends, very close, dear friends, who have gone on and later committed suicide, especially during the holiday seasons, which we're in. And I would tell you, based on my experience, this is the most important time to reach out for help. So if during the holiday seasons, especially when you feel so lonely and you see all the nice stuff on social media, and you don't feel like that's happening to you, that if you're of that mentality, it's time to reach out to somebody, and very much so. So I appreciated you brought that up. The other thing is you talked about the suicide rate among law enforcement. Law enforcement is one of the most dangerous professions in the world. Let alone that, the most dangerous portion of law enforcement is the self-harm that comes from it, right? The self-medication, whether it's alcohol or other type of things, and then oftentimes leading towards suicide. So anywhere you want to weave that in, because that's kind of my background, I'm extremely interested, and I'm so glad you're bringing this up.
Yeah.
I actually have some stats if you want me to share those.
Mm-hmm.
So the veteran stats I got from veteranaddiction.org, and the veteran stats say that alcohol is the primary substance for 65% of veterans entering treatment centers, which is nearly twice the rate of civilians, and that male veterans are more than twice as likely to be diagnosed with, now they call this a disorder too, alcohol use disorder, but we know, I guess you know what that means. More than twice as likely to be diagnosed than female veterans, and males twice as likely to develop addiction to drugs. And then the suicide rate in 2017 was 17 per day, which we know is higher than that 22 that you even quoted earlier. It's higher than that now. And that veterans are 1.5 more times likely to commit suicide than civilians. Then as far as the first responders go, from addictioncenter.com, it's estimated that 30% of first responders develop behavioral health conditions during their time of service, and 50% of those mental health disorders are thought to be affected by addiction. 36% of EMS workers suffer from depression. 72% suffer from sleep deprivation. So you're right, sleep is a huge thing. And they did refer to this as PTSD, but they said more than 20% of EMTs suffer from that, which all of these things put them at an increased risk of substance abuse. And then I thought, well, that's 2017. I want to know what's happening now. So I found an NIH study from November 22, and it was a sample of 51% law enforcement officers and 49% EMTs and firefighters, and nearly 40% of those screened positive for possible substance abuse. So that's much more than the previous percentage that I said earlier, which was 30%. So we know this is on the rise. That's the whole point kind of those statistics, I think. And so we know there's definitely been an uptick in recent years. Would you agree with that? And if so, what do you think is behind this?
I have a couple different thoughts. Yes, unfortunately, I do think that it's on the rise. There's a lot of different factors at play. All of these are my personal opinion. So I'm just going to put that out there.
Nice
It's
disclaimer. Yep.
This is not science. This is the world according to Shavonne. From what I've observed and what I'm seeing and what has been reported to me, because I interface with, of course, all of our clients very regularly, but not just that, I interface with a lot of the peer support teams, the CISM teams, etc. And I listen to their stories and what they have to say and how they got into it and what they're experiencing. And one of the common themes that I'm hearing over and over is that the calls are getting worse. So, for example, fire and police, they didn't used to show up to teen suicides. That wasn't a thing. I mean, every once in a while, but it was so rare that it was not considered normal for a teenager to commit suicide. But now, in recent times, it has become a lot more prevalent to where the first responders that I'm interacting with are telling me that it's somewhat normal for them to be like, oh yeah, we had another 13-year-old hang themselves. I'm like, oh my goodness. So one, I think the calls are getting worse. The frequency of the calls, like there are more calls as well. And with the change in cultural opinions, and unfortunately the animosity against law enforcement, and even now towards fire, which I was surprised to learn that some firefighters also feel like the public is not super supportive of them. There's not that same like level of respect, and not as many people are going into the profession. So the people that are in the profession are having to work more overtime. There's some departments that mandate overtime. So unfortunately, our heroes and our warriors, they're not getting that time to decompress, to do self-care, to work out, to spend time with their family, to relax, to sleep, to recover. And they're just constantly going on these horrific calls. So there's a lot of different factors at play. I also think with our phones and constantly having exposure to social media and the news and the doom and gloom that's out there, we didn't used to have that. Like back when I was growing up, or maybe like, you know, my parents are in the 70s or the 80s, there were major news stations and everyone got their news from either the local newspaper or essentially the local news or large news stations. And certain things were covered and maybe certain things weren't. But now with influencers and social media and YouTube and everything else, people are getting this barrage of everything that's happening. And unfortunately, a lot of the doom and gloom is what catches people's attention and captivates them and makes money. And so there is this unfortunate cycle that we're kind of stuck in of just all of the atrocities and learning about them. And yeah, the calls, like school shootings, those weren't a thing, you know, 20 years ago. And now it's like, oh, another school shooting. Oh, what do you have for breakfast? You know, it's just kind of become this normalized thing, and then they're publicized. And so this perpetuation of really domestic terror has just, it's escalated, and that's impacting everything, unfortunately. And it's terrible.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. I mean, the things even I've seen recently on social media just about, you know, like the guy in Utah that like took out his whole family and then committed suicide. I mean, that I think it's just unbelievable. So anyway, that makes sense. Okay, so
I think the pandemic too, I think contributed to it. A lot of people it was hard. I think the pandemic was hard on everyone across the board. Some people fared better than others, but across the board, I think it was really hard. And I think that a lot of mental health issues were exacerbated in the pandemic, especially with the severe isolation that a lot of people were forced into, or the lack of work, or the financial stress, or being, you know, more in like the first responder community or essential workers having to go to work and being forced to work, or mandated overtime, or being forced to do this or forced to do that. There are so many stressors. And I think now we're seeing those things, the repercussions.
Right. The effects of all of that cumulative, the cumulative trauma that we all went through. Yeah, for sure.
Or the lack of services that were available during that time. Like I know for me, you know, being an alcoholic, like AA meetings shut down in person. It's like, what do you mean we're not going to meet as a group? Like, no, we need this. I will die of alcoholism long before I will die of COVID. So,
yeah, good point. All right. So then as far as the services that you provide, could you break that down for people? And I also want you to break down how what you do is different than other treatment facilities, because you go about this in a very different way. And I want to make sure that we highlight that as well.
Sure. Okay. Services that we provide. Mainly, we provide medical detox and residential care for substance abuse and mental health. We're a dual diagnosis facility with a primary diagnosis of substance abuse. Basically, what that means, if someone is only suffering from mental health or PTS and they're not drinking and they're not like using any drugs, they don't qualify for our program and they need to go to a mental health program. And a lot of that has to do with, we are pro recovery and continuous sobriety. And so if they come here and they don't have a drinking problem, and we're like, well, we're going to AA every night and we're going to read the big book and you got to be sober. Yes, you're an alcoholic. Like, that's just not going to work. So they need to have a drinking or substance misuse problem. When people first come in, sometimes they come in intoxicated, sometimes very intoxicated. And that's where the medical detox comes in. With severe alcoholism, if someone is drinking, let's say, a gallon of hard liquor a day, they can have very severe medical complications that come up when they stop drinking alcohol. And we do have them just stop drinking the alcohol. We don't taper them down and like give them smaller amounts. But what we do is we have them sit in front of our medical provider. So the doctor basically evaluates them and determines what sort of medications they should be on to make sure that when they detox, they will not have a heart attack, stroke, seizure, etc. So typically for alcohol detox, they're going to get put on Valium. It'll be a Valium taper for 3 to 5 days roughly, and usually high blood pressure medication like clonidine. So relatively simple, because when they start to come down off the alcohol, usually their blood pressure goes up. And so we do have medications on hand because we don't want anything, bad to happen to them. So that's kind of in a very basic way what we do. If needed, there are other medications that we can administer if like their anxiety is through the roof or other things are happening. But for the most part, we try to use the least amount of medications and still be medically safe, but not turn them into a zombie. And that's where a lot, or my perception of other treatment facilities or the way that this is done at other places comes into play. I personally think that a lot of places, they over-medicate. And the reason that I think that is that the state has mandated that we check on the clients at least once every 30 minutes. And if we don't check on them every 30 minutes, it's a $500 fine per occurrence. And the reason for that is that too often at a medical detox, clients have died in their sleep. Wait a minute. Why are people dying in their sleep? They're being overly medicated and they're dying of respiratory failure. And that is so ethically wrong. I can't even begin to explain. They're not dying of the detox. I mean, maybe in some situations, and I am not a doctor, but this is what I have experienced and witnessed and learned about in the industry, is that when people die in detox, a lot of the times it's from them being over medicated. Now, sometimes it's not necessarily the fault of the facility that they're in. Sometimes clients, especially opiate addicts, they'll come in and they will lie about their using so that they get put on something like Suboxone. Or an addict might come in who is not an opiate addict. Maybe they're using something else, but they know if they say that they've been using opiates, that they will get Suboxone, and then they're over medicated and then they die of respiratory failure, or a combination of things. So it can look different. But by and large, we will not over-medicate our clients. Now, on the other side, we're not trying to torture them. We're not trying to make them tough it out and suffer, but we don't want to turn them into a zombie. And we don't want to lead them down the road of drugs are the answer and the only answer, and that's your solution. For us, it's the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we do believe that people can recover, because AA has been around for about 100 years, and it has worked for thousands and thousands and thousands of people in basically all the countries in the whole world. And so we are big book thumpers and we teach the 12 steps. But going back to the services that we provide. So we have medical detox, and also clients can refuse medication pretty much for any reason at any time. We're not going to force people to take drugs. And that's where we are different than, let's say, the VA, where their primary modality for caring for the veterans is medications. We're like, no, we're going to try to have you on the least amount of medication. So once someone gets through that detox process, takes a couple of days, and they do a lot of sleeping and they're kind of out of it. And, it sucks. Like, detox sucks, but they get into residential. And that's where they are participating in getting up at 6 a.m. We have breakfast from like 6 to 7, and we start programming right at 7. We have our first group, which is a morning reflections, and they're starting to learn to check in with themselves. And we have actually someone in recovery, one of my amazing staff members, that leads them through some various material related to AA and sobriety, and they check in. And then we have a different staff member come in after that and lead them through another group that's a little bit more educational and inspirational to start their day. And then at 8:30, they hit the gym, and they've got an hour for, we call it health and wellness, but really it's workout time. Some clients want to work out in our garage. We have a pretty nice gym in the garage for a little home gym, or some clients want to swim in the pool. Other clients want to walk. Other clients want to run. So variety of different activities for them to participate in the morning. And then after that at 9:30, we start our first either group or therapy session. Everybody here gets therapy at least twice a week, and that's private, individual, one-on-one therapy with our primary therapist, who is a veteran himself. He's amazing. I absolutely love him, and I'm so grateful to have him on our team, because as a veteran, he can really relate to our men, and because he's a man, and it's definitely a female-dominated field, clinicians and therapy. So I'm really excited that he is on our team. Everybody gets therapy twice a week. Some other programs, it might only be once a week. And since in general, people are here for about 4 weeks or 30 days, typically, if you only had therapy once a week, that's only like 4 sessions. And the first session is really just building rapport and kind of figuring out what the therapy sessions are going to focus on. So then just 3 therapy sessions, that's not enough to move the needle. So everybody here gets at least 8 sessions. So 2 per week for essentially the 4 weeks that they're here. In addition to that, if someone is married or has some other stuff going on, then we will actually bring their spouse here to have therapy, like couples therapy, if she is close enough, or if she's, far away. This clients maybe come from out of state, we'll just do Zoom. And also all of our therapy is in person. So all of our clinicians actually show up to our facility. They're here in person, and they actually sit with the clients for either the one-on-one therapy or the group therapy. And I think that's important. There is a time and a place for virtual therapy, but it's not while you're in residential treatment, as far as I'm concerned. So everything is done in person from a clinical standpoint. So then in the morning, we've got a couple hours of therapy or group, or like that sleep doctor that I mentioned, like he has a session. And we also have various peer support guys that come in. So retired law enforcement, active duty law enforcement, retired firefighters, active firefighters, paramedics, and veterans that come in, and they're all sober, and they all have their own unique, incredible story, and they come in and they share that. So it's sharing their experience, strength, and hope in hopes that our current clients will relate to something in their story, and that will help launch them into sobriety as well. And then we have a chef. I've been to treatment facilities. I've toured quite a few treatment facilities to kind of figure out how other people are doing things. And I was at one facility, and the owner said, yeah, I really don't want the clients cooking. And so I'm not going to hire a chef. And so we just order like Uber Eats every day. And I watched, and there was like roast beef sandwiches sitting on the counter, wrapped up in plastic, that no one was interested in eating. I was like, this is not working. So I believe food is essential for our wellness. It impacts our mood. It impacts our sleep. It's going to impact our relationships. Of course, it impacts our health. It impacts everything. I mean, literally, the tissue that we are made up of is from our food. And so food is fundamental. I'm really big on food, exercise, and sleep, and mental health, and a whole bunch of other things. But like,
isn't it crazy that it's so simple?
It really is. Like, it's not as much rocket science as people think. It's like, we got to get you sleeping, exercising, eating well, getting up early. And then there is a lot of hard work emotionally, a lot. And that part is a lot more complicated. But the reason that our clients are able to face those really difficult things like past trauma, vocational trauma, etc., is because we're giving them the foundational pieces of sleep, healthy food, and exercise. And also limiting the toxic inputs like the news and social media. We don't have TV. We don't put the news on. We don't let them have their phones all day. They do have their phones in the evening, but as much as possible, we're trying to limit that constant like negativity coming in and that exposure to violence and suffering and all of the terrible things that they're already, trying to recover from by and large. And so we have a chef here. His name's Peter. He's awesome. He's with us Monday through Friday. The weekends are a little different. We'll like go out to eat or, cook burgers on the barbecue or grill pork chops or whatever. But during the week, Peter's here and he cooks lunch and dinner for us. Everything is made from scratch. He loves it when I buy all organic stuff. He doesn't use any soy. He doesn't cook with any gluten. So everything is super healthy. And it's fresh and it's homemade and it tastes delicious. He's absolutely incredible. I have to like not eat all the food around here. You're going to put weight on. But the other thing is that we all sit together at the communal dining table and we all eat together. Like the staff and the clients sit down and we have a meal together. Because one of the things that I try to teach to the clients is that they have to learn to activate their parasympathetic nervous system. Most of them are stuck in the sympathetic nervous system, which is like overstimulation. It's it's the state of high alert, basically, which is where most first responders still live. And when they are on duty, that is where they should be. But when they're eating a meal, when they're home with their family, when they're, relaxing, they need to be able to tap into that parasympathetic nervous system, which controls things like involuntary breathing and digestion and sleep and a lot of those other kind of non-voluntary functions. So sitting at a table can be really, really hard for a lot of our clients and sitting through the full meal. And so a lot of our clients struggle in the beginning, but as every day it becomes more routine, they're able to sit through the full meal by the end. So communal eating and healthy eating is very important. And then we have also different drug and alcohol counselors that come in and we have afternoon sessions, whether they're psychoeducation or group therapy or 12-step based. We have a variety of different things that we do in the afternoon. And then at 3:30, it's time for more health and wellness. So they work out for an hour and a half before dinner. And then dinner is at 5. And again, we all sit together at the table and have a nice dinner. And then after dinner, it's off to an AA meeting. So most of my staff is in recovery and they love having part of their job is go to AA meetings with the clients. So we've got a cool van and we take everybody to a local AA meeting. And once a week, one of those meetings there is a firehouse that hosts a peace officers fellowship meeting. So it's all fire and police and they go to that meeting, which is awesome because it's first responders only. So in a nutshell, that's more or less what we provide and a bit of how we're different.
And another way that you're different is that you only allow a limited number of people in at one time too, right?
Yes. Yeah. We only allow 6 clients at any one time.
6. I wanted to say 6. I had it right. Okay.
Yeah. So we're very small. And other treatment centers are really big, which that might work for some people. And that might be just what they need. But we are a standalone, very small 6-bed facility. And we are not part of a larger facility. So some facilities will say, oh, we're a first responder program, but really they're a general population facility. And then when they get, 5 or whatever first responders, they put them all together in like the same therapy group or the same kind of area. But usually at those places, when it comes to meals and the gym, they're with everybody else. And it's like, wait a minute, this is not what I thought it was. So we don't do any general population, period. We don't.
So Shavonne, let me talk to you like a skeptical veteran, okay? And skeptical.
Yeah, I knew this was coming. I knew it. Go, Adam.
Yeah.
Because there's other people thinking it.
So I got to tell you, right? There was no way in the world I would go to the VA. I mean, I've got $30-something thousand worth in this grill right here, and there's no way in the world I'd go to VA to get that done. I could have done it for free, but there's no way in the world because that's where you go to die. And everybody I know that goes there for the mental or the emotional side of this, it seems like they just go downhill. Okay, so the VA, to me and to the vast majority of veterans out there, that is absolutely a no-go. That is how you get yourself killed. All right. So can I ask you this? to me, it seems like the only way in the world you can be able to do what you do is if you have a personal connection to these people who understands where they've been, right? From both the military side, if you don't get where I've come from, then forget it. I'm not talking to you. From the cop side, if you don't know where I'm coming from, then I'm not talking to you. Forget it, right? But you just said something that was very key to me. You send these people off to firefighters and the cops. Now, whether they're veteran or not, cops unfortunately are in the war every day, 24/7. I don't care if it's overseas or not. Actually, cops on the street see more war than the veteran does on a daily basis, the military veteran. So that was key to me that you said that, because I was listening to this thinking, okay, as a military veteran, maybe I'll come to you, but as a cop, there's no freaking way. But when you said that, it suddenly made sense that when you send them off to their AA meetings or whatever you called that suddenly they're talking to people that can understand them, right? So am I wrong here in how I see this? Because I know other veterans that feel like me. We would never, ever, I mean, we'll shoot ourselves in the face before we'll go to the VA. Sorry, that's just how it sounds. That's just how it is. But when you send us to other cops and other firefighters, suddenly it sounds like now we're talking to people that actually understand it, have been there, and can talk the language. Is that what you're trying to do? Because that's what it sounded like to me.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So we have an ever-growing peer support team, and literally I have this amazing group of active duty. Like, I've got lieutenants from LAPD that are volunteering their time because they have, 10 or whatever years sober, and they care about their guys. And so they're coming here on their own. I mean, I feed them lunch, but other than that, like, they show up and they love it. They're like, man, I got so much out of sharing my story. And I'm like, I'm glad it could benefit you, but they care. And they have wild testimonies of getting DUIs, ending up in jail, and somehow still keeping their job or sometimes getting fired. So I love having them here. So we are getting an ever-growing, not collection, but ever-growing team of peer support that are volunteers that are either active or former or retired veterans, fire, police, etc. And they come in and they share their experience. And that is a huge part of what we do, because it has to be that relatability, that like, hey, I'm a cop. Hey, I'm a paramedic. I'm a veteran. And this is my story. And this is what worked for me. And that's a big part of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's all about attraction, not promotion. You share your story and someone sees themselves in that other person's story. And they're like, oh, it worked for him. And he was suffering what I'm suffering now. So maybe this sobriety thing might work for me too.
And it's not just sharing the story. It's sharing your story and actually caring, right?
Yeah.
And you have to have people who've lived it, who've been there, and actually care about others to be able to do that. I know that from firsthand experience. So if it's just somebody who's just there to just pass the time, then, I mean, a veteran, there's nobody that's better at sensing the fake than somebody who's lived it, right? So to me, I was skeptical until I heard you say that, and then suddenly I realized, okay, you're bringing in people that live the war every day, right? I mean, that's what cops do. Firefighters do. They live the war every day. And if you can live the war every day and understand it and survive it, now you can help other people, whether it's military veteran, cop veteran, firefighter, don't really care. First responder, military, it's all the same thing. If you can live that, then you can actually deal with people on a level if you care about them. So to me, that was a huge thing, because I was skeptical until I heard that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's all about building.
I was a huge skeptic.
And so much of actually what we're doing is building trust with like one person at a time, whether it's an actual department. So I will have lieutenants, chiefs, commanders, etc., come over, introduce them to who I am and my staff, and they tour our facility and they see what we're about. Or one of our greatest referral sources has been our clients. We've had a few different deputies come through and they've gone back to their departments and they're living proof that what we're doing works. And so then their buddies who are also suffering from alcoholism have been able to come in and get help. And that's happened more than once, like the referral system. And it's absolutely incredible, because they've seen it work for their friend and they're like, man, I want what he's got. And then they come in.
Okay. So how do you get past the tough, hey, I got it, right? I mean, exterior, right? I know that one of the first really hard times that I had dealing with stuff was when they came and offered all these mental, emotional services. I'm like, I got it. I don't need it. Tough cop, tough soldier, don't need that. Later, I realized that was a mistake. How do you get through that exterior? Because that's the vast majority of these people.
Yeah. I beat them with my stick. I'm kidding. It's only proverbial. A lot of the people that come in here, because they have that mentality that you just described, they've already gotten so beat down by their drinking or their using or life or the consequences. They come in here so broken and so desperate. A lot of them are actually really hungry and ready to receive what we have. So for some people, they want it because they're absolutely desperate. I mean, I've had deputies come in and they're so blacked out drunk, they don't remember this, but they're just crying in their bed, face down. We're trying to console them and they're just crying out, I'm worthless, I'm hopeless, I've ruined everything. And it's heartbreaking. We've had other law enforcement come in after being arrested and getting locked in a cell. And they're like, if this isn't my bottom and this isn't my end, then death is what's waiting for me. And so that reality hits them so hard that they are willing to participate in what we have. And because pretty much for the most part, all of us are sober here. We do have some normies, especially some of the clinicians, like they're normies, they're not addict alcoholics, but they have their own stories. Like one of our clinician, she has her own story and has battled suicide and won that battle. And so it's very personal for her. And everybody that works here actually really cares about seeing these men get better. And I won't let anyone work here that doesn't really, really, really care. The other side of it is sometimes we get people that come in here and they're like, I'm not an alcoholic. I just have mental health problems. So we're like, no, you're an alcoholic because of your drinking problem. Like it's very obvious, but sometimes they don't want to be labeled as an alcoholic or they can't stand the thought of never drinking. And so we chip at them little by little by little by little by little. And we just keep at it. We keep loving them. We keep supporting them and we hold the line. We keep telling them the truth. And for most people, when they hear the truth enough, and then they see it, and then they see it again, and then they hear it again, and they keep getting reminded, it starts to melt and that change starts to happen. And that's the beauty of the inpatient treatment center model is we get to have such influence on them basically every second of the day that they're here. And because we don't allow TV, and I don't just put on the TV and be like, oh, here's your babysitter. Like, no, we have them have those human interactions and interact with people. And engage and
so let me ask another question. And Laura, I don't mean to jump in on your show, but
no,
let me
you're
ask
fine. Go ahead.
So Shavonne, you talked about, they have their workout session, an hour and a half a day, that type thing. That's a pretty big thing to the veteran, to the cop, and to the firefighter out there, right? I mean, there's something about a brutal honesty of a serious workout. It's not just the sweat, right? It's not just the muscles. It's really the internal fortitude to persevere in hard times, right? And I think that's part of the reason the large majority of the civilian population just won't do it, right? But can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because to somebody like me, to the veteran out there, the cop, the whomever, that's an important thing. Is it some namby-pamby little, you get your little yoga pants on, do your little stretchy thing, or is it a real deal? Well, tell us about that.
There's two options, and we do have to meet people where they're at. I've had two guys that were 65 plus, so I'm not going to try to torture them in the gym. So we kind of, for the guys that are 60 and over, we bend the rules a little bit for them. But I had one guy that he would walk circles around the block against the deputy that was 300 plus pounds that could hardly make it around the block. So a lot of times the camaraderie and like the peer pressure of, hey, we're all doing this, you're going to do it too. Or once someone is no longer the new guy and they realize, okay, I've been here for 2 weeks and there's a new guy coming in, I have to step up so that this guy gets the help that he needs. Because even though I'm not doing a good job working and helping myself, I want to be a good example to that guy because I want to help that person. And across the board, first responders and veterans, they always want to help other people. And so we kind of spin that around to get it to where it also helps them as well.
So
But getting back to the gym. So it depends. Some of it is self-led, but in general, I want them to do like cardio in the morning, but some people prefer to lift. And if they are serious about it, we let them like do their thing. What I challenge them to is in the afternoons to actually go to a professional gym down the street with me and take an hour-long HIIT circuit training workout class. So it's high intensity. And I basically taunt them, like, you're going to let a girl kick your ass? Like, let's go. And then I kick their ass at the gym. They're like,
I bet
oh,
that works too. Yeah.
Yeah. No one's been able to beat me so far. Some of them can outlift me, but they can't outperform me.
Well, that was one of the immediately noticeable things to Laura and I when I first saw you was the obvious athleticism. Okay, so now you're starting to talk a veteran's language here. So you're doing real lifting, right? You're not just lifting little jugs of milk. You're actually doing real lifting, and you're actually doing real solid cardio and sprints and things like that. Is that am I correct there? Pull-ups, push-ups, all that stuff.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. And most of them have a really hard time with it, but most of them want to go back and they're like, okay, this was great. And there's a lot of motivating factors. One, it's an incredibly challenging workout, but the high that they get after the workout, which is another thing I'm trying to teach them of, you don't need to be on an SSRI. Get yourself working out and get into that discipline, and you are going to feel better naturally. Now, some people might have to be on medications for whatever medical reason. Okay, fine. But by and large, we get them sleeping, eating well, and doing intense workouts. They're going to start to feel so much better.
But it also takes them back to their former glory, right? But also lets them know that they can actually do that. And I think that's an important part to any recovery program, right? It's not just, kumbaya in some meeting. It's going out there and hitting the iron and sweating and bleeding and working through stuff that you didn't think you could do. So, okay, I'm glad to hear this because I think that's so desperately needed by this community.
Oh, absolutely. It's fundamental. And it's the analogy that I make for everything of we have to learn to pick up heavy things and then put them down.
Yes.
You have to build resistance. You have to be able to do hard things. Life is hard. We get sold a bill of lies when we're little kids of this, happily ever after nonsense. No, life is hard and it's going to be a battle. And you have to attain that level of discipline where you do the things that you don't want to do because you know it benefits your future self. And so working out is the easiest way to see that play out.
I'm out. Thank you.
Yeah. I think you satisfied the skeptic, Shavonne. That's awesome. And that was one of the questions I was going to ask you. He did it in a much better way. So I'm glad that he brought that up because, there's people watching that those kinds of things are going through their mind. So he's just, relaying that. Okay. So FYI, guys, I know this is going a little long, but we are going to still have the live Q&A at the end of the broadcast. So if you have questions for Shavonne, put those in the comments and we'll gather those at the end. Before we wrap up, I do want to give you an opportunity to talk about do you have a standout patient, a most memorable moment from the facility that you'd like to share? Anything stick out to you in particular?
There are like 2 clients in particular that do, and I'm trying to remember if I already touched on them last time. So I'm trying to think of maybe like a more recent one.
It's been a while since you were on last time, hasn't it?
Yeah. Well, there were 2, and forgive me if I'm retelling the story, but these are 2 of the ones that really impacted me the most. A firefighter that had admitted that he had 2 failed suicide attempts. And actually, one of them, he was so ashamed because he woke up being Narcaned in the back of an ambulance, and it was his buddies because he was a paramedic firefighter. Yeah. And he came in here super, super depressed, very suicidal, to the point like we're literally like following around everywhere. And when we did his coin out ceremony, his graduation, he admitted that when he called me for his admission, so, when I first talked to him, he's like, Shavonne, I had a bullet in one hand, a special bullet that he'd purchased to commit suicide. And in the other hand, he had his phone, and he called me. And it was through our conversation that he was able to get the help that he needed and come into treatment. Yeah. And watching him get better was amazing. It was. The first part was really, really, really hard. He wanted to be here, but he didn't want to be here because he didn't want to face all the reasons that he was here. But we got him to stay and continued to coach him and love him and beat him with that stick throughout the process. And he did come around. We're still in touch. And it's great to see that level of success. One of the other clients also came in very suicidal. And I just remember the day he handed me his suicide journal and was like, if you hadn't have taken me in and given me these services and this treatment and all of this care and taught me how to battle my anxiety and how to overcome and let me just be me and go through this process and help me, get sober and recover, he's like, I wouldn't be here. He is law enforcement and he had an active plan to eat his gun. And it's just like, whoa, the severity of what we see and the impact and the reality of what we do. I mean, it's so necessary and it's so important. And it's just, I'm honored to be able to get to do this work. And I'm also heartbroken that a place like this has to exist, but we're in the fight and I'm so glad that we exist. And I'm excited to meet the clients that I know are out there right now that need our help, that are struggling. And I'm so excited to welcome them in. So, yeah.
Well, that's a good segue because I was going to ask you, what is the first step? I mean, what if there's a spouse who their husband or wife is in law enforcement? They can't just call you up. I mean, what would you say to somebody that they can? What are the first steps? Let's just start with that.
There's my phone number, 805-701-1309. The first thing is just call me or text me or both.
Okay.
I handle all the admissions because we're such a small facility. I can do that. And so I talk to everybody when they make that first call and they reach out for help. And I'm always just like, wow, this person actually picked up the phone and called me. And I'm so excited to help them. And I do my best to get them here as fast as we can. There's some unfortunate logistical things that we have to work through, like medical insurance and how we're going to pay for treatment. Like I have a very large team here. So we have medical staff, we have therapists, I have behavioral health technicians, drug and alcohol counselors, crazy, insurance that covers everything and rent and, got to put food on the table. So unfortunately, there's a lot of cost involved, and running a business, I need to be able to keep the doors open to continue to provide care for our future clients. And so part of that is we do have to actually charge, but for the most part, I bill the VA and we bill private health insurance. So if you're a first responder and you have Anthem, Cigna, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, whatever private insurance, we bill them. And then if you're a veteran, we bill the VA. So once we get that situated, then we just coordinate really the transportation. It's like, how quickly can you get here?
So it really is that. I mean, in a way, that's pretty simple. Pick up the phone, right?
Yep. We'll take care of the rest. I'll coach you through it one step at a time. And I'm really stubborn. I don't take no for an answer. So I will remove all of your obstacles. And in the event
you being stubborn,
right? In the event that we're not the right treatment facility for someone, I will help you find, the right one, or at least, give you the resources and tools to be able to find one that's more appropriate.
Perfect. Well, we are now officially over the hour.
We did it.
It is kind of funny how quickly that goes, but I want to give you an opportunity before we leave tonight, because after Shavonne is done here, then I have some announcements before we wrap up, and I'll let you guys know who to expect for the audience before we wrap up tonight.
So, visit throttleandthrive.com. Check us out. if you like what you see and you are someone who might need our help, please feel free to call me. Or if it's a loved one or a coworker or someone you know that is struggling, feel free to pass along our information or call me to get more info. And if you're listening and you're part of an agency or like a veteran organization and you would like me to present, I'm more than happy to do presentations that are all about what we do and the services that we have to offer. And so if you would like me to present at one of your agencies, I would be more than happy to do that and help get the resources to the people that need them. Because for us, it's all about saving more lives. So we need your help reaching out to the people that need our help.
Yeah, absolutely. And if this, if you know anybody that you think would be helped by this video, please share this far and wide. And Shavonne, I'm going to wrap up for the night because I don't want to take up too much of your time. But again, I want to thank you so much for sharing your time with us. And we just are so honored to have you on the show. You're doing such good work. Keep it up. And thank you for all that you've done for me personally, too.
My pleasure. I love it. It's so awesome to actually get to have my job be helping people. It's really incredible.
Yeah,
I love it.
It's good work.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, guys, so let me give you just a few announcements before we wrap up tonight, and then I'll let you know who to expect for next week on the show. Tell me in the comments what you thought about my interview with Shavonne Thompson. I'm really, really glad that she came back to talk with us a little bit more, and really glad that Adam was able to jump in there as well. So before we move on to who to expect for next week, just want to let you know, we have in the works to have Shavonne come back on our Defenders, I guess you could call it the Defenders Uncensored Roundtable discussions. We're going to dive into this topic a little bit more with some other people that are experts in their fields as well. And we'll have that on the Locals channel. So if you go to locals.com, search up Defenders Live, that is where you'll be able to find that exclusive content. And we're going to invite Shavonne back on with a couple other experts to be talking about this very subject. I want to thank all of you who have become paid supporters on that locals.com channel. And want to let you know, too, that we just dropped an early release of an episode called The Truth About Domestic Violence with my friend Lisa Stiers of PacWest Defense. I just interviewed her recently, and she shared a very powerful story that I think you won't want to miss. You can check that out on locals.com as well. And the last thing I want to say before who is coming up next week is, I don't know how this came up, but mark your calendars for January 31st, because that episode, I am going to be doing something new that I've never done before with Mr. Neil Widener from Active Self-Protection. Neil invited me to come on his live broadcast on the Active Self-Protection app, and I'm calling what we're doing 7 at 7. What we're going to do is exchange 7 questions, 7 random questions with each other. So I won't always be in the driver's seat. Sometimes I'll be in the hot seat as well. And we'll be doing that on January 31st. You can find that on the activeselfprotection.com website, and it's going to be on their app. And there is an exclusive offer for using the code Defenders30. You can get 30% off for the first 3 months for the Active Self-Protection app if you're interested in doing that. Also, guys, I need questions to ask Neil Widener. So if you have any really good questions for Neil that you think that I should ask him, you can email me at laura@defenders-usa.com. And one last thing before we get to who's on next week. There for the next 4 days until the end of the year, Neil told me they're offering for the Active Self-Protection app 50% off if you use the code HOLIDAY50. So if you're watching this before January 1st of 2024, you can still get in on that 50% discount using the code HOLIDAY50. But if you're watching after January 1st, you can still get in on the 30% discount with Defenders 30. Anywho, next week, we're going to have Kyle Schmidt on the show. Kyle was a police officer for 25 years in the state of Arizona. He is also a nationally known competitive shooter with a master classification in both USPSA and IDPA, and many, many other credentials that we'll get into next week on the show. I'm excited to have him on and can't wait to talk to Kyle Schmidt next week. Tune in Wednesday, 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Until then, take care.